I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you back your e-learn, cause as every semester progress and every semester start off kickstart, sebenarnya semester lepas kita hanya boleh thank you Zahira for your response. The link here that you see, you all can see my share screen kan?
Tak nampak.
Tak nampak.
No, doktor.
Ya, tak nampak.
Okay. Klik tapi tak keluar. So kalau ikut semester lepas, we have to create the link from WebEx. So early of the semester saya bagi link yang ni kan? So tapi untuk semester ni saya dengan Dr. Chung dengan Prasad sebenarnya we can add activity on for WebEx meeting specifically for that week. So dia arrangekan when is the WebEx meeting, and the good point is that the recording will automatically, I can put it automatically into e-learn so that tak ada, you tak perlu tunggu saya when I'm free to download, sebab when I record, the records will go to clouds and the clouds takes few hours to come back to my system, and then I have to download the video, then I post it into your e-learn. So it takes sometimes to go into e-learn. Jadi saya rasa the system that WebEx and e-learn link together, I think it will be better. So starting next week, I'm going to add in the WebEx link from here, from this. Yang ni lah nanti. Boleh tak? Okay kan? So everybody have to go to e-learn and click the link to access. Then I can delete this. Alright? Faham kan?
Doktor boleh.
Boleh. Okay, and then the next thing is that I asked the earlier questions because we have classes. So statistic comes back to, okay, let's go back to your notes. Okay. So go back to your class. Every time I do something, I would recap. Saya akan try to recap back what's that we have learned the past few days. So hopefully you are still in a smiley mood and you are happy with the class, all right? So the next would be recap of last week of basic information. Is that we have learned a lot of terminology that you have to understand statistic. So I also consult some statistic master and they say the statistic course is very large and very long. And then most of the time, what kind of, I mean, you are in second year, of course, you have done some assignment. What kind of software that you use to process your data? Like so many things. What kind of, the question is that, because I don't want to make poll, the question is, what kind of software that you use to do statistic or calculation? Do you use a calculator or do you use Excel? Most of you use Excel. Ada sesiapa like still guna calculator, and or there are other software that you use that you know? Tak adalah. Okay. But you have to, okay. There are few pros and cons of every kind of software because today is supposed to be introducing software. But once we recap, one thing is that software is good, but the limitation for software is good. Excel is good, but the limitation is the data that you can analyze is very limited. Okay, so one example that I did for students is that I gave them 3 years data, only one set of data. So the individuals is the data set that I give to student individuals is seawater. Okay, that is the object seawater. My variables is sea surface temperature. And the sea surface temperature, we log and we recorded for 3 years continuous, every half an hour for 3 years. And I gave the data sheets to students to analyze. I think those who take my elective course would analyze one day. The Excel crash. Means sometimes when you work with software, there is always limitation. Excel is good for small data set, but large data set, there are a lot of others. Okay, so when we talk about individuals, we know what are the variables, and variables can be two. One is quantitative and one is qualitative. Sesiapa boleh bagi tahu saya apa tu quantitative, apa tu qualitative? Pop quiz. Come, answer me.
Quantitative macam value ataupun numeric
Okay. Quantitative can be measured value.
measurement. Aku macam kira
Yeah. So you measure by like berapa cm, berapa ekor, berapa ketinggian. Right? Something that you measure from different individuals. Okay? Different individuals. So we record like temperature for seawater. So you record. Okay. Qualitative means you categorize them. Okay, you categorize them like male, female, apa lagi? Tall and short. Categorize them. Okay. And then after that we have quantitative as value, qualitative described into category. Okay. And then after that we have population. So statistic is actually for to know what are the problems in a population. Okay. But for science work, population is limited to what are the fields that we have, and then we have to samples the population. Means out of 1,000 fish, you take 250 to represent the whole population. Okay, we cannot have an analysis of population. That's why statistics is very important when we want to know what happened to the population. We doesn't want to know what happened to the sample because the data, for example, now I actually have data from you from your last few days activities on your personality test. I will tell you what are the population and what are the samples that I get from your data set. Okay, and then from the data there are four level of measurements. This one I think we stopped here last week. Right? We stop here for what are the level of measurements. And then the answer is, how come the answer is not out? Okay, right? So that 4 is a nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Okay, very simple is that the nominals means a statement. A statement from a category. Okay, what are the category? And then after that is ordinal. Ordinal is apa dah? I also have to look back what is my ordinal. Saya pun dah macam student bila exam kena pergi cari. Okay, so you order the data to be different category set. So like worst and best, it still can be compared. Data need to be compared. So ordinal can be compared, but it's either, for example, the ordinal that we have here, Prime Minister for Malaysia, he is the best, currently the best. Okay, but that is still under the category of statement. Okay, and then after that we have another two more category, the ratio and interval. So interval you can measure. For example, interval here is the year that he was elected. And then the last one was ratio. Ratio, okay, some students are PM me on this ratio because I posted in the WhatsApp group what are the difference of category, and one of it is about true zero. Okay, some of you might think what is true zero. Every data that you collect, there must be zero. There must be like CM, a ruler must be a zero. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But for example, year 1995, 1999 is still a number, but there is no true zero. Because you cannot start with 0 year. Tahun, tak boleh start with 0 year because it's just a geological, is a representative of number. So it's interval is not a ratio. But if you say age of people, then you can have 0 because you start as day one when you are born, you are 0. Bila lepas tahun, you are 1 years old. After 2 years, you are 2 years old. So you have 0. Okay. So sometimes 0 is that you have to understand what are the true 0. You tak boleh, it cannot be like every number must have 0. Other example number that don't have 0 is, let me think. I also have to read back what are the numbers that is no 0. I only think of like time. Okay, time, for example, if you say time, depends on what. For example, the time of what to say, if you are doing analysis, for example, the survivorship of fish in a murky water tank. So you put the fish into the murky water tank. So the time of you put the fish into the tank is 0. Then you count the time until the fish is dead. Then that is a true 0. But if you want to know the life cycle of the fish, the time of the birth of the fish, you still can determine the year by autoliv. But if you can say, for example, you use length as an indicator. So the larger means the longer lifespan. The smaller fish is the youngest one. But there is no 0 length of fish. Dia tak ada 0 for the length of. So, for example, height. You cannot start height of human being with 0. Okay. So those have no true 0 goes into the category of interval. Okay. Okay. I think this one we will kalau tak faham pun, I don't know how to explain. you have to find. So there are 4 categories, and then as we go and analyze data later on, you will see what kind of data that you can categorize into interval or ratio. Okay, if numbering there is only interval or ratio. And this numbering, you can also categorize them to ordinal if you put them into categories. So you say 0 to 5 age is young kids or babies, and then 7 to 12 years old is junior kids. So you put them into category, then they are ordinal data. But if you look at age, so one set of data, you can have different kind of analysis. Okay, once you know what are the level, then you know what kind of analysis that you should do. Okay, so the purpose of it, one of it is descriptive and inferential statistic. Okay, for descriptive statistic, a lot of students forgot how to describe a statistic. Okay, descriptive statistic is that when you have a figure for a graph, you can actually determine from the whole figure saying which is high, which is low, which is in higher number or lower number. So you have to describe. One of the things, for example, like now, later after the class or when, like today, I don't know if you walk around the house and ask questions, but today you can go in front of your mirror. You try to describe yourself, your face, how you want to describe your face. I have 2 eyes, 1 nose, and 1 mouth. But how to describe, for example, you want to describe yourself to a blind man, for example. You have to describe like my eyes sepet ke, or my eyes is round, and then I have black eyeballs or brown eyeballs, and then I have nose which is buncung ke, bulat ke, that you have to describe. And then you say your lips is what? Your lips is thick. So this is called you describe something. It is not like say, oh tu kereta proton. Carilah kereta proton saya kat parking FSSM. Habislah saya berapa kereta proton ada kat sana. You have to tell kereta proton Saga, warna merah, ada stiker kat belakang, ada apa-apa. So you describe something. Description is very important for you to tell to people what is happening with your data. So the information that you collect, you have to visualize what kind of data that you can present to people. Comes to your final year, there will always student ask, I have this data, what should I do? Apa yang patut saya buat dengan data ni? First thing is that you know how to present the data first. Of course, you need to do statistic. Okay, statistic to make sure that your data is significant ke, is your data suitable for the population or not. But at the end, you still have to describe. Saya nak tahu perbezaan ikan. Okay, for example, I want questions. I think this is also a lively, how to say? A live communication. Okay. Live communication is that you know how to communicate. One question, for example, I think this is a real story lah. I asked my friend from Singapore, you know my husband kan? You know my husband Dr. Sia. Siapa tak kenal he is a taxonomist. So sebelum ni, when he was doing his PhD, he was doing ikan kekek. You orang tahu ikan kekek kan? So ikan kekek iloi the ikan kekek, the small ikan kekek. And then now he went to venture into ikan glamour. So there are 2, ikan kekek dan ikan glamour. So my friend asked him one simple question. Sometimes we all scientists also like, you ask us also, we answer you differently. So my friend asked, apa perbezaan ikan kekek dan ikan glamour? I'm pretty sure you all can answer also, apa perbezaan ikan kekek dan ikan glamour? What is the difference? Ayah, nama memanglah different. Saya dengan Adam pun different. Jenny dan Afiq pun different. Nama memanglah different. Tapi saya nak tahu, saya nak cari ikan kekek dan ikan glamour di pasar. Macam mana saya nak bagi tahu mak saya? Cahaya tak tahu apa tu ikan kekek. Okeylah. Ikan bawal dan ikan kerapu. Macam mana nak bezakan?
Shape.
Bentuk, size.
Betul.
Orang pertama akan nampak dia punya rupa bentuk. Betul? The colour. So, dia kata ikan bawal segi 3 dengan lepeh. Ikan kerapu panjang dan mulut besar. Kan? Glamour kurus sikit. Sikit tu macam mana identify? Jenny pun kurus sikit sekarang. Tapi like, kurus berapa? So, berapa sedap. So one of the like science, because science already like into that. So Dr. Sia replied to my friend, oh ikan kekek the lips protruded. Maknanya ikan kekek kan mulut dia boleh like protrude out. And then ikan glamour tak boleh. Then we were in the car and I look at him like, very specific lah. Tapi perbezaannya ikan glamour panjang, ikan kekek kecil segitiga. I mean the diamond shape. Kan? That is the descriptive. You have to describe to people. You have to describe to your mom. Kenapa you pergi belajar marine science? Saya boleh tahu ikan apa. Ikan gelama ekor besar. Ikan gelama ekor besar kan? When you describe besar-besar tu besar apa? Besar like besar like ikan whale ke? So you have to be very specific of what you are going to describe. Okay, for example now, I'm going to ask you, no lah, I think this is homework. You can ask your brother, sister or your mother, apa perbezaan mangkuk dengan pinggan? Pinggan letih, mangkuk bulat.
Mangkuk
This is how
tinggi
you
sikit.
describe things that people,
Bulat.
saya tolong pergi ambil mangkuk so you know that is mangkuk. Kan? Tapi kalau saya kata marine science, apa beza jellyfish dengan apa perbezaan penyu agar dan penyu kara? Everything must be different. So you have to describe. That is the problems when the descriptive statistic wasn't fully used by student or fully used by anybody. Okay. So dia ada descriptive. And then after when you describe, you have to do inferential statistic. Does your information is significant to tell the differences? Okay. Dia mesti ada test. I think bila kata test, most of the student will tell me T-test, ANOVA test, two-pair test or whatever test, man-mental test. That is all tests to tell you that your data and your descriptive statistic tu betul atau tidak betul. Kan, corak kat shell. Wah, when Syafiqah telling me just now the turtle, corak kat shell, habislah. Kalau you nak cerita corak tu, you have to ukur one and by one what are the specific. For example, morphology of the corak. So dia lagi panjang ke, lebih lebar ke? Kan? You have to make sure that you describe and then you have statistic to prove. Kegunaan statistik adalah untuk membuktikan yang kajian tu betul, hasil kajian tu adalah betul atau tidak betul. Tidak betul tak semestinya is a wrong answer. Tidak betul maksudnya your hypothesis is, your data shows that there is no differences. Katakan you nak buat kajian mangkuk pula. Kajian jenis-jenis pinggan di rumah Adam dan rumah Afiq. Kan? So Adam and Afiq have to go analyse what kind of pinggan mangkuk yang ada kat rumah dia. And then after that, ada tak perbezaan? Kalau tak ada perbezaan, there is no differences, maknanya they have almost the same kind of pinggan kat rumah. Faham tak? Don't always assume that your statistic analysis must support your hypothesis. Your question, kenapa ikan tu lebih besar? Kenapa, all the kenapa, sometimes the answer is that memang tak ada berbeza. Dia adalah sama. But you ask, kenapa pinggan kat rumah dia dengan pinggan kat rumah saya, ada tak beza? Mungkin memang tak ada beza. So that is the hopefully you all understand what I am making now lah, right? Like, what is the importance of statistics? Statistics, they are proven or non-proven, okay? I think this one also I touched a bit last week, but I think most of you dah bagi muka saya yang muka dah blur-blur, like you're already not into the class. Okay, so today I'm going to recap a bit on the sampling. So sampling, got a lot of kind of sampling, and most of the time kerja lapangan ke, field trip ke, the sampling for marine field, there are a lot of problems. One, you have to look at the weather. Two, you have to look at the condition of the sea that you are going for sampling. Four, how wide are you going to do your sampling? Does your sampling enough to represent the area that you want? Okay, because katakan sampling always come with individuals. Okay, so individuals comes with an object or organisma. Katakan saya nak kaji organisma ikan di Pulau Bidung. Ikan terumbu karang di Pulau Bidung. Okay. How many sites do you want to go and survey when you want to say ikan-ikan di Pulau Bidung? How many, I mean Pulau Bidung kan berbulat kan, that morphology of Pulau Bidung. How many sites do you want to survey when you come up with this target studies? Your target study is fish diversity of ikan terumbu karang di Pulau Bidung. Berapa kawasan kajian yang anda perlu kaji? Satu? Dua? The question is sekeliling pulau. Ya, kita kena pergi sekeliling pulau. Kan? So kalau tengok kepada morfologi pulau, if you look at the morphology of pulau, you have east coast and west side of the island. The east side and the west side are different. Betul? They are different because one side face the open sea, one side face our mainland. And then there would be differences on the north and on the south. So at least you need 3 and above representative. And one is either you can go random sampling. Saya sampai sana saya nak sampling. Lepas tu saya nak pergi sampai sana saya nak sampling. So you randomly go, right? Or you have systematic samples. Means every 200 meter or every 2 kilometer I want to sample. That is systematic. Means you start from Pantai Pasir Cina. Every 100 meter you go, you want to go down and see what the fish. Every 100 meter you go, that is called systematic. And then stratified is that after you put a random number, then you choose after 3, I pick 1. Then after the second one, I pick, I can do 100 meter, then 200 meter. And then after that, I do 300 meter. After that, I come back to 100 meters. So you plan the differences. Or you can do cluster. Maknanya saya boleh sampling daripada Pantai Pasir Cina all the way to Pantai Vietnam. I snorkel all the way for that 1 kilometer, then I stop for 2 kilometer, then I start again. So you have cluster means you combine everything together. So sampling for marine is even tougher because every time you sample, you have to think about the factor of money, the time, and the environment. Especially when we mention students to do FIP students to do sampling, they say, oh, saya tak boleh pergi December because it's monsoon. But in the research question, you say you want to see the monthly changes of water quality, monthly water quality data. But then you say November, December, I cannot go because it's monsoon. Okay, so that is a lot of problem. And then we ask students, for example, how many times should you sample? Then you say, I only go 1 time because I only have 1 time sampling money. All right, so we have to plan according to what we have. And for example here, this is picoplankton. I mentioned to you, this is a very good representative that is clustered into 3 conditions. Okay, one is river area, one is estuary area, one is open sea ecosystem. Not open sea, I mean islands ecosystem. So they cluster and then they put sampling points everywhere. So sampling points, you have to imagine and you have to plan before you go. You cannot say, I go and see. For example, one of the project I did with Singapore is to look at water quality along the river of Port Dickson. The problem is I'm from here, so I only can plan that we want water quality river to the sea is that we have to take salinity water parameter from the higher salinity of 32 until 0. Okay, so one of the islands, one of the river that we went, because there is no road by the river, you tak boleh kata, oh saya nak pergi sampling and then I go around until I find the right salinity or right place to sample. Sometimes there are limitations, like there is no access. Okay, there are times that I ask my colleague, I send him off with my small dinghy. You know, kalau pergi pantai, kalau pergi pulau, sometimes you see parents family bought a small dinghy, like almost 2 meter panjang yang pump air tu. Okay, that can maybe sit 2 to 3 kids, baby, small kids that you can bring them out. So I bought that dinghy and then I pushed my friend, tak ada engine, nothing. I pushed my friend out with the dinghy. And the dinghy already start to pancit because got hole already. But because we want sample from the river in the middle of the night, because have to look at the tide. So this is the condition when you work with environment that we have to plan accordingly, okay? And then even for biological, for example, like coral reef like this, I remember I show you, either you can have point sampling or you can have the whole line transect sampling, okay? And then for example, intertidal, you have to determine, for example, how long is the stretch. Katakan you want to sample of grain size or beach profile of Pantai Batu Buruk. Then the question is that, where is the starting point and the end point of Pantai Batu Buruk? How long is that stretch? And from the how long is the stretch, how are you going to categorize that, or how are you going to subsample? Because for example, one of the project, for example, marine debris di pantai UMT. Soalan pertama, di manakah pantai UMT? Soalan kedua, berapakah replicate yang anda buat di pantai UMT? Ketiga, bersama mana setiap replicate anda. So either you start from one end and then you start to do your marine debris project until the end. So all these are statistics. If you remember my first class that day, statistic is core-ain. You have to collect, you have to organize. You have to analyze the data. So the collection is very important, right? So for example, this is a very good sampling point. So they really sample every 0.5, I think according to here is every 500 meter they sample here. Okay, wherever they can sample, they would sample. But there are spaces like this, don't have dot because tak boleh nak access. Okay, so there are places that cannot be accessed and cannot be. So tak boleh paksa. Kalau boleh buat, we take the data. But that data, for example, they want to do sampling on beach and sand spill. But you can see here there is already river water. You don't ask the student, or I cannot ask you to jump into the river and take data. There's no point of you that getting that samples because the samples does not represent the sand beach. It was representing the river over here. All right. So there is no point to get the samples. So everything must be justified and accordingly. Okay. So baseline for planning a statistical studies. All studies that you study is a statistical study. Statistic means you must prove your study is, what is the outcome of the result of your study. If you don't want to know the result, then why do you want to study? For example, now you study marine science because you want to get a good grades and you want to know about marine ecosystem. But at the end of 3 years, if you don't know what is marine science, then better you don't study lah. Alright. So what is that you have to identify the individuals. Then make sure what are the variables. Okay, every variables, there are protocols of taking measurement. This is very important. How do you want to collect sample is a protocol. And then it's very hardly to find saying that I found a new method with no protocol. There must be a protocol. Nak ambil ikan pun mesti tahu nak guna jaring ke, nak guna joran. You nak ambil sediment pun you should know that you use scoop or you use grab. There must be a protocol. When you get the samples, when you have the variables, you know what are the variables that you have to measure. For example, the weight of sand, the weight of rocks in sand particles. So you have to dry the specimen, you have to shift the specimen, then you have to weight the specimen. It is all protocols, okay? And then determine the entire population. So for example, last few days I asked you to do an assignment. So my population is MMS 3012. But I only have a certain sample because not everybody answered. Some of you did not answer my assignment. Okay, so when I collect the data, I have to make sure how am I going to interpret the data. I'm going to show you the data later, and then how am I going to interpret the data. All right. Then, of course, you have experimental and observation. Observe means you go and see. Okay. And then after that, experiments that you have to make experiment. All these are part of statistics. And experimental is very more protocol because experimental, for example, you want to know something in a certain time. So you have to make sure that you finish your job at a certain time. But observation usually are in longer time. For example, the differences of beach profile before and after monsoon. So you have to do before monsoon and have to wait after monsoon, and then you observe again the studies. But experiment is that you have to have a lot of others control environment. One thing for sure is that all experiments have replicates, all experiment can be repeatable, all experiment must have control. One thing that everybody forgot is the control. Control means a controlled ecosystem. For example, your research question is that what are the feeding rate? What are my experiment is kenaikan berat badan pelajar semasa MCO. So my variables is what are the food intake, kan? And then how much, what is the weight of the food? The control one is somebody yang tak makan lah. Kalau yang tak makan, dia tak naik berat badan, or maybe the control is very only 100 gram of something per day. So that is the control. And then everybody can eat like 200 gram, 300 gram, 500 gram, 1 kilogram. But the control must be there. Means you know the differences if you control the diet and non-control diet. Kenaikan berat badan. Okay, so this is you have to experiment, you must have one control. Okay, one case study here. Okay, my case study here, for example, is that Pulau Bidong, we do aquaculture of hybrid grouper. Okay, so the individual here is jawab serta-merta. Tak dengar. The individual is hybrid grouper. Okay, siapa yang jawab aquaculture tu salah lah. Okay, so our study object is hybrid grouper, and the information that you get is this hybrid grouper are fast growing fish and large in size. Dia makan cepat, dia tumbuh dengan cepat. That's why it's a very good fish for aquaculture. And if you can see that it's a crossbreed between tiger grouper and hybrid and a giant grouper. Giant grouper are not dominant in our region. Giant grouper are dominant more to cooler country like in Australia, where giant grouper is like giant, you know, it's like 2 meter big grouper. Malaysia tak ada punya. Malaysia mostly is the tiger grouper. But tiger grouper, the meat are more tender and then they grow very fast. So now aquaculture say they hybrid these two, and then they have this called hybrid grouper, which they can grow fast and they can provide food. Okay. So the situation is that last year's storm. This is case study, not real. Last year's storm, the whole cage at Pulau Bidong overturned. Okay. What would be the problem? What is the question that you want to ask now? If you are a marine scientist. What question? What are the problems from this situation? Last Sunday, you all never go around and ask questions, man. You all go and ask questions. Now I already give you the problem. So what kind of question that you want to solve? Ni, rupa ni dia cepat. So now is that in a marine ecosystem, you only have limited grouper. But suddenly the aquaculture cage in the sea tiba-tiba overturn and collapse. And then you have like 100 groupers of this hybrid into the marine ecosystem. What is the problem? I'm not going to answer. I'm going to wait you to answer. Alter the food web. Lagi. Limited space. Okay. So now, some of you answer already. Now the grouper is there. So they are invasive species to our ecosystem. Because our ecosystem naturally don't have this hybrid grouper. Now this hybrid grouper tiba-tiba lah, for example, supposedly marine science, this course MMS 3012 is for marine science student. Tiba-tiba ada masuk 100 orang scientist daripada Singapore to come to this class to take the exam with you. Kan? The exam, for example, the exam must be have a range of exam lah kan. Somebody must have A, some of you might get C. There would be a bell shape, for example, a normal curve. Tapi tiba-tiba ada scientist masuk. So what happened to your marks would reduce because I have to harden the questions. Kan? So now the hybrid grouper goes into ecosystem. What happened to the natural ecosystem? Alter the food web means the smaller fish getting. What is your hypothesis? You have to think. Hypothesis is your assumption. What do you think would happen before you make the studies? Small fishes population decrease. Okay. So, okay. Local fish terancam. I put here. You can see now, right? I'm sharing this screen. Local fish terancam. Decrease of fish. Okay. So first thing you have to do observational study. You kena observe dulu, betul ke tak betul your hypothesis. Betul? You have to make sure that your data is before the fish. I mean, that's why data is very important. If there is data, for example, saya nak tahu a hybrid fish would eat on other fishes like ikan damsel, kan? So damsel fish, there must be a number. After the aquaculture overturn, there must be a number. So you must go and observe. You observe the hybrid grouper. Adakah dia makan ikan dengan banyak? Right. Then that is called observational study. Observe before and after. That is also a study. But if you want to do experimental study, what kind of experiment that you are thinking to do? Saya bagilah 100,000 to you. Do a study of this aquaculture fish. What can you do? Go makan hybrid grouper.
Benda pertama doktor kena check location ni doktor.
Okay, betul? Okay, good. You check location, you know where is the aquaculture overturn, where are the location. Now location is Pantai Pasir Cina, depan UMT. Okay, lepas tu?
Lepas tu dah lepas check location, kita kena tahu dia punya adaptation. Dia ada waktu siang ke malam, bila dia punya waktu dia lah.
Okay, so now you say grouper pagi atau malam. So it's important for you to know your individuals. Now you target your individuals is this hybrid grouper. Betul. And then you have to know what are the behavior. So grouper eat, for example, they are nocturnal. Dia memang suka malam-malam tu dia tunggu ikan lalu dia makan. Okay. Now you know they are pagi-pagi lah, malam pun dia tidur. So pagi-pagi dia makan. So your study can be from 8 in the morning until 8 at night. But what kind of experiment? What kind of problems? The question here of statistic is that you have to solve your problem. You have to solve the questions that you created. If you don't have questions, If you just want a data set, there is no point. Saya hanya nak tahu diversity ikan. So, lepas tahu apa jadi? You have to do the experiment or you have to do the observational study. You have to kaji. That is the main thing of research. It's not only research. If you go out to work, you also have to do research. Like saya nak jadi pengusaha. Pengusaha mana yang dapat gaji lebih banyak? You have to find, you have to, you all please answer me. What kind of experiment study that you think would happen? Boleh nak jawab
Spesies ikan apa yang dia makan.
Spesies ikan apa yang dia makan. Okay, so you have to do observational study juga. That is observational study. Maknanya you kena observe. You have to stay there. Either you letak GoPro or you have to letak video cam. Look at certain angle, the fish, what kind of fish that they eat. Spesies ikan. That is so observational. Tapi experiment. What kind of experiment?
Kita eksperimen dia dekat different salinity of water.
No. Now you already you don't change the problems. The problem is now the hybrid grouper is in the coral reef. So they are the problems in coral reef ecosystem. How are you going to do some experiment on the problems there? Takkan you nak change the salinity dekat terumbu karang dekat Pulau Bidung. You cannot put in fresh water just to reduce. Hopefully the hybrid grouper mati. Then the coral also mati. Then you create more problem. Okay. One example. So now you observe grouper, what kind of fish they eat. Okay, you observe, then you know the number of certain fish after the incident, right? So then you categorize them. After the incident, Pantai Pasir Cina, this area have a lot of, you observe, there are a lot of hybrid grouper. On the other side, there are small number of hybrid grouper. So my experiment is that, for example, does the fish diversity reduce in high intensity and low diversity intensity fish? So saya kaji lah. So saya experiment is that I put a cage or maybe I put a boundary for the grouper to be in that coral reef area. And then the other side, I kill all the tiger grouper or the hybrid grouper. And then I see does the population change after 1 week. After 1 week, maybe the cage here with a lot of grouper, there is no other fish. But on the other side, the fish is still there. So I would know that tiger grouper or hybrid grouper eat a lot of smaller fish. And they target what kind of fish. Okay, so this is like you have to design the experiment. If you design your sampling is observation. You design, you go and determine. That is observation. But if you design how you want to do the sampling, right? What kind of protocol, then you have to do experiment. Experimental, not necessary in tank. Not necessary, but you still have to do under control ecosystem. Okay, good example of design. Okay, good sample of design is this is a control group. Everything must have control. If you see all the student of marine science after MCO 1 year at home, then when you come back next semester, all kurus kering. And tiba-tiba got one like me fat already. So if I am a control group, if I am the control one, then saying that the students can maintain their health by getting fit and healthy. Okay. And then after that, there must be a random. You cannot have control and one item. There must be like control, experiment 1, experiment 2, experiment 3. One is that you have to replicate and then you have to randomize for make sure that your experiment can be workable in any condition. Okay, and then this is how you have a good experimental design. Okay, let's go to, I think before I go, okay, I go straight. 16 personality test. Okay, My question here is I want to know what are the personalities of our students. Okay. And then the personality of the students are determined by a set of questions. Okay, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to show you the data. Right. Okay. Okay. I know there are supposedly 78 of you, betul kan? 78 pelajar. 78 of you. That is my population.
27.
What happens seorang lagi? Okay, 77. Okay. But yang jawab soalan saya, supposedly I can do a population study. Maknanya every 77 of you answer to this question. But after the questionnaire, this is you are the students are my individuals. There's only 62 because one is title. 62 only answer. So my sample size now is 62. And this 62 need to be responsible for the data for 77 students. That is already good enough. That is about equals to 62 divided by 77 times 100. 80%. So I can have 80% of the samples from the whole population. All right. And then after that, I ask you to answer me personality, what are the personality, what are the roles, and what are the strategy. These roles, personality changes throughout time of your lifehood. You don't think you do this one, you would be like this forever. This is for you. Maybe when you finish, you can do again this personality test and you found out that you have changed your mind and then you have changed a little bit of your condition. So what I do, you see, Excel is good with small data and I do a pivot table. My analysis is very simple. I can have pivot table, then I'm not sure if you have used this. So I can say that I want, for example, I want type of students. Okay, personality types here. And then like how many of personalities that I can see. Okay. After that, I do want this column. Okay. So I know there are 61 answers. One of you gave me blank. 61. So there are a lot of information that I can get. And this data set is according to this yang dihantar. Alright. So when I have all the answer, so now from personality test, I would know that, okay, let me get here. Okay. From this 66 personality test, there are actually 16. Okay, and this 16 is very simple. They are analysts, they are 4 architects, logician, commander. They are, all of these have a number, but at least I know now, in the whole group of you, of 77, there are no people consider themselves as executive. So you don't have the ability yet, belum lagi, maybe you have the ability later on, to administrate means you want to organize something, you be the executive, you are the boss. Okay? Maybe none of you are thinking that I want to be a boss. And at the same time, there are none of you are entrepreneur. Maknanya tak ada lagi, none of you thinking that you want to be an entrepreneur. And most of you think that you want to be Protagonist. Okay. Protagonist is a diplomat. I think diplomat is easy. Diplomats means you can communicate with people. You want to have a good relationship with people. So I think all the students here you are good with making sure that all of us are in the same hala tuju, okay? And then you can advise people what to do, right? But I'm hoping that after this, for example, this is my data, okay? I run the statistic and I can come up with graph. But I have to check if my data is correct or not. So I ask you question number 2, your row. Because actually all this comes up to be a row. And then after that, I don't know why this number doesn't tally with this number. Supposedly there would be 2, 4, 6, 7. 7 of you are analysts because already categorized. So now I know there are some error in data. We have to, not all data every time you can run analysis. You have to clean the data. So now I have to go back to the data set and then I have to find all these people. Okay. And then I have to check who are there. Does the data represent? So the data, kalau salah, I have to eliminate. I have to clean the data. So for example here, this one, this is correct. You see 5, 1, 1, 11. 5 plus 6, 11. And then after that, I don't know why got 2 people go and key in designer and executive. Maybe my understanding is don't have, but according to the 16 personality test, supposedly this is into this category. I'm going to go back this. Already categorized. Analyst is these 4 categories, sentinel these 4 categories. All right. So getting your data, making sure your data is clean for you to do analysis. Not all data that you kumpulkan, even though it's a fish data, plankton data, water quality data, grain size analysis, physical data that you collect or you download, not all data can be useful for you to do analysis. You still have to find, does your data ada tak data-data yang sometimes is, even though if you sampling, for example, salinity. So 2 of you, for example, Kumuta dengan Naili, you went for sampling. Okay, so 2 of you buddy together. Then after that, 1 of you take water temperature data, 1 of you record data. So one of the girl, for example, Naili would say, celup 30.1, celup 27, celup. Okay, so that is how you get the data betul. Then you write in the data. And then when you come back, suddenly you see your data. Tiba-tiba ada satu data written 47 temperature of seawater. You have to check. You cannot say that is the data that we collect. Either Naili salah tulis ataupun Kemuta salah cakap. Ataupun that is a problem with the logger. Dia ada masalah. So you have to make sure that your 47 degrees Celsius temperature yang you collect dekat Pulau Video, that data is invalid. And you cannot use that data to analyze. Faham tak? Okay. At least ada orang bagi respon. Okay, so this is where you have to come with statistic. You have to clean the data. So we slowly, I think for me, it's just a recap because I'm going to leave you back for the Ocean Decade punya program kan. I mentioned that I'm going to give you time to go and attend. It's not because that I have nothing to teach. I can teach you the following, the software and other stuff. But then sometimes information not necessary. You can go to Ocean Decades and see what are the questions. So to create the questions, when kids are young, when you are young, when I'm young, we always have questions. We ask our mother, our father, why Kenapa the sun comes from there, never come from there? Why the rain is from the top, not from the bottom? There are certain times when you ask a lot of questions, why? But as you have know a lot of information, the why questions become lower. Tak tanya soalan because you always think that, oh, I can get information from Dr. Jamila, Dr. Heng lah, Dr. Nadia. But then you have to ask back the question, why? Like what? Apa yang terjadi? Apa yang berlaku? So you go to Ocean Decade and you go and listen to people like see what kind of situation that we are facing right now and what are the things that you want to solve. We want the youngster to be more proactive and think of what you can do in the future. It's not that I feed you all this, you exam dapat A, then after that, what? My question is where is the way forward? From the 16 personality test, you can know your target. If you are good at communicating, you can go to media, social, and communicate and educate. If you are good with other parts like you are introvert, you don't like to work with people, you can start with your own information. You can start with your own like jual shawl ke, jual batik ke, whatever you want to jual. Then you can start it from there. Okay, understand yourself and taking information. So please, I think I don't want you to download all this software yet. Okay, just now I mentioned to you, right, there are a lot of software to do different kind of statistic analysis. Excel, I don't need ask you to download because Excel should be Microsoft ready in your laptop and your computer. But for example, PASS. PASS is a statistical tool that mainly on geological samples like kurtosis, skewness of grain size analysis. QGIS, I think most of you dah masuk kelas GIS kan, Dr. Encik Idham punya kelas. Okay, ask you how to do map, how to do layering. I don't know what program did he ask you all to do the GIS mapping? AGIS. AGIS. Yeah, so there are a lot of program. Yeah, AGIS is also one good program, but AGIS have license kan. Okay, QGIS can be used. Okay, R. I think when talk about R, ramai yang takut, I have to write command. No worries, the command is easy, the command is simple. As long as you know how to put your data in the Excel, how to extract your data from Excel to TXT file, R can do everything for you. It's just that, do you want to go and venture? It is not an easy job. I also venture into R and it takes me like days and weeks just to plot one graph. But I have to learn. Okay. And then after that, climate data operators, because we talk about climate, the data is very large. It's no longer 60 data, 100 data. It's like 600,000 data that you have to analyze. All right, and then and apply. I think this one is more to physical, where Dr. Chung would eventually ask you to do. But I am only okay with R and PASS. Okay, and then after that, try to read more on what kind of software, because we are going to teach you basic statistics. But how are you going to get the value? It can be from different kind of software. For example, the Excel that I show you here, I can simply key in a formula and then I can get a result equals to 1 plus 1, 2. You as the same thing that actually this formula you can put in R would give you the same exact number 2. If there is a software that gives you the answer of 3, delete lah. That software doesn't works well. Okay, this is all about how you want to write information for the computer to analyze. Okay, all right. I think that's all for my class today. If you all have any more questions, you can pop into our WhatsApp group, or you can go into eLearn and put into the chat box or wherever lah. All right. Have fun dekat Ocean Decade. I'm going to see you all there. Boleh?
Boleh.
Boleh doktor.